you're never going to have perfect information. So you've got to make your own commander's assessment, if you will, CEO assessment of where do I think we really are with whatever the situation is or the decision I'm about to make. We have a tendency to want to predict the future. And you'll get that wrong. Every time you try to make a prediction, it'll be wrong. Have the courage to act on your instincts.
Welcome to the Science of Leadership, the podcast dedicated to helping you become a better leader. Here, you'll gain valuable knowledge, hear inspiring stories, and learn the scientific principles that promote exceptional leadership. I'm Tom Collins, your host, and I'm thrilled to have you join us on this journey to becoming a better leader. Today, I'm excited to have General J.D. Thurman on the show as we discuss the leadership benefit of trusting our intuition. General Thurman served as an Army helicopter pilot and went on to command soldiers in the Gulf War and Iraq War, ultimately serving simultaneously as the commander of United Nations Command, Republic of Korea-U.S. Combined Forces Command, and the United States Forces Korea. He was awarded numerous medals, including a Defense Distinguished Service Medal, 4 Legions of Merit, and 2 Bronze Stars. Since retiring from the Army, he has served as the CEO of J.D. Thurman Enterprises. General, thank you for joining me today on the Science of Leadership, and thank you for your service to our nation. Now, before we get going, let me address what some listeners may be thinking is an elephant in the room. That is, this is a podcast about the science of leadership, and here we are setting out to talk about intuition. That may sound like a non-scientific topic. Well, stick with us because we'll get to exactly what the science says about the role of intuition in leadership, and it may well surprise you. General Thurman, when we talked before, I asked you to tell me a leadership lesson you learned the hard way, and your answer was the topic of today's conversation. You said, always trust your instincts. For our listeners, could you share what you mean by always trust your instincts, and then share the story regarding the Red River Depot that led to that?
Yes, Tom, and first off, thanks for having me, and actually, this has benefited me to go back and review everything that kind of happened to me over nearly a 39-year career. First off, I was a major general back in 2004. I had taken command of the 4th Infantry Division at Fort Hood, Texas. It was a division that had just recently redeployed back from Iraq, and I had taken over the division. Basically, I had a brand new division, and that was in July. So I'm meeting new people, new leaders. I had known many of them before, but it was quite a task that I had to, one, transform this brigade or transform the division and add 2 additional brigades to the division and redeploy it back to Iraq and take over multinational division Baghdad in Iraq. So I was off and running. We had to reset the division's equipment and get it back in operational condition. Plus, we had to add a lot of new equipment, new command and control, new helicopters, etc. We were off to a great start. We were having some degree of difficulty of getting our maintenance back in order on that equipment, and we had a lot of our equipment being reset and refurbished at Red River Army Depot in Texarkana, Texas. And so we had a maintenance meeting a couple of days prior to this ill-fated event that occurred to us. And on 29 November, my assistant division commander for maneuver, Brigadier General Ben Allen, said, "Sir, let me take a team up to Red River and go make an assessment." I said, "Well, when are you going to do that?" He said, "The 29th of November." So I said, "Okay, that sounds good." Well, he was going to take himself, our division support command commander, who was a full colonel. He was going to take his aide we had just promoted him and Ben about a week earlier, and the helicopter crew plus the maintenance officer from the division of CW5, Don Clapp. I said, okay, that sounds good. So that morning on the 29th, I got up, I looked at my communications to see if anything had come in overnight, and I had a note from Ben that said, sir, we're headed to Red River. And I looked outside. I was about to go do my physical training and looked out there and I said, well, I hope these guys have the weather to fly. He came back to me and said, sir, the pilot said, tell me that everything's good to go. Now, this crew had been flying over the weekend. This was 29 November, right after Thanksgiving. They had been supporting the presidential mission for President George H.W. Bush up at Crawford, Texas. So I said, well, that's got to be a good crew. So I didn't question that. And so I went out for my run. And as I'm running, my gut is telling me, I'm not sure that's a good idea for those guys to be flying. And the weather was the ceiling was down, and the observation was probably less than a mile visibility. And I said to myself, I don't think these guys should take off. And so I went and I did my run. I ran a couple of miles and came back. The phone rings. It's my aviation brigade commander. He says, sir, we're missing an aircraft. I said, oh my goodness. He said the last contact they had with them from approach control, they were requesting to go IFR, and that's in the clouds. So it told me right then that we had a serious problem on our hands. As the time went on, that morning I was supposed to go to Texas A&M to do a funeral for a lieutenant that had been killed in Iraq. So I told my other assistant division commander, a guy named Nolan Bivens, I said, Nolan, I want you to take this funeral for me. I think we got something bad that's about to unfold. The next call I get was from Don McWillie, my aviation brigade commander, and he says, sir, the aircraft's down and it's on fire. I knew right then we had a major problem. So I grabbed my chief of staff, Kurt Potts, Colonel, and I said, okay, we got to go to work. And I said, tell me who all's on this aircraft. So we got the manifest, and I'm sorry.
No, sir.
The day goes by that I don't think about this.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll get to the bottom line here in a second.
Yes,
So
sir.
I grabbed my chief and my command sergeant major. I told my sergeant major, I said, his name's Ron Riley, very close friend of mine. I said, Ron, go up to Moody, Texas, where those towers are, and report back. Tell me what's going on the ground. I'm one of these guys you got to get eyes on as soon as you can, because first report's going to be wrong, second report will be wrong, third report. And I've got this voice telling me that you shouldn't allow those guys to take off. That's that gut feeling. That's what we're talking about today is instincts. And so the next thing that happens is I call the deputy corps commander who's in charge of Fort Hood, Major General Jim Simmons. And I said, Jim, we got a bad situation. We got an aircraft down, a UH-60 Black Hawk, 7 people on board, no survivors. And I said, I'm going to go ahead and notify these families. It's already on TV. And of course, the Army has strict rules when you make next of kin notification. I said, I'm going to notify them. It's already on TV, and I will go up there and get on the ground up there so I can see what's happened. Again, weather was terrible that morning. I don't know why those aviators took off in that kind of weather. but they did. But what happened was when they took off, they went inadvertent IMC in the clouds, uh, and they hit a retaining cable on a 850-foot TV tower at Moody, Texas, and that cable sliced through that helicopter. It went down. It threw the assistant division commander and his aide out in an open plowed field. I've never seen nothing like this. And the general was laying probably about 150 yards from where his aide was, and the other 5 on the aircraft were burned up in the wreckage. Aircraft was still smoldering when I got there. Long story short here, 7 people dead, an aircraft that's on fire, damaged. I had notified those families. I called them and went and did that before I went out to the crash site. So I go out there, we recovered the remains. I called the Aviation Brigade Commander. I said, send me another aircraft out here. And the weather had started to lift, and I'm going to fly back with these aviators. So they know, 1, I got confidence in them. And 2, we can get our people back that had perished. So here's the lesson in this story. When you have a feeling in your gut that tells you things are not looking good, you got to question what is going on. And in the military, you got to do that immediately, because if you let that pass, something terrible can happen, just like it happened to our division and it happened to me as a commander. The thing that I tell everybody all the time is trust your instincts. You have to embrace uncertainty. And, I get up every day and ask myself, what's the worst thing that's going to happen to me? I did that every day in combat in Baghdad, because something bad is going to happen. And you got to be ready to deal with the unexpected. And this gets back to the intuition that's developed, and that's that inclination that something is going on. And you got to be curious and ask questions. And see, I trusted everybody would do the right thing. That's where leadership comes in. If your instincts are telling you something, you've got to go back and question it. So, Tom, I'll pause right there and see if you have any questions.
Yes, sir. Well, General Thurman, thanks for sharing that. I know that's a heavy story for you, and clearly took and continues to take an emotional, psychological sort of toll that echoes, decades later. You shared kind of how that experience has shaped your leadership. To what degree, I guess the question I would ask is, to what degree has that really informed? How did that moment change the way you led?
Well,
moving forward?
First off, you've got to make a constant assessment of your vulnerabilities every single day and moment. I did that in Iraq. It shaped me when I went back to Iraq, and we lost 240 soldiers in combat, 1,355 wounded, and 47 amputees. I was a commander. I'm accountable. And I feel responsible today that I could have probably prevented this. I don't like woulda, shoulda, coulda, but I could have probably helped. But what it's done, trust your instincts, embrace that uncertainty, stay curious, ask questions, ask the second and third order effects. Don't assume anything. Assumptions get you into trouble because you have a tendency to assume away the hard problem and not get at it and say, hey, wait a minute, we're about to have these guys take off. This weather's terrible where I'm at. What are you guys thinking? And I didn't do that. So the other thing is understand the risk. Every day that you're leading, know what the risks are in your formation or your company, and because something can go wrong terribly, and it can be a financial decision or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But you've got to question that, and don't be afraid to step up and say, "Hey, wait a minute, stop. You guys run this by me again, and make sure that you've thought through this." And so, you know, what it's also done is it's allowed me. It's improved my decision making. You're going to take in a lot of data when
Mm-hmm.
you make a decision. So you got to weigh that out in terms of what's scientific maybe and where the art is to leading.
Yeah.
And knowing, hey, I've seen something like this before. It doesn't look quite right. We're gonna stop and we're gonna redo what we're doing.
Yeah. Well, I think you hit on something that Malcolm Gladwell, who's a popular writer, wrote a book called Blink, and he talks about that, the ability that we have to make really rapid decisions and where that comes from. And that's, I think that's to some degree at the heart of what we're talking about. In preparation for our conversation today, I really spent a lot of time thinking back on things and thinking about how we do and don't pay attention to our instincts. And as I was thinking about it, it seems to me that a lot of the really big, if we want to call them watershed decisions in life, often come down to whether or not we go with our gut. I can think back to so many major crossroads where it really came down to just that, whether or not I would trust my instincts. And one that I'm reminded of was when I was finishing training. I had trained at a really great institution, an Ivy League institution that was highly vaunted, and I had the opportunity to stay on there as a faculty member, and I was wrestling with that versus what would be my next duty station, if you will, in academic medicine. The place that I was thinking about, the place that I was considering, was in Arkansas, at a lesser known sort of institution, a great place, but certainly was not this vaunted Ivy League program and so forth. And as I was going through this decision-making process and thinking about it, the people where I trained thought I was insane. All this time since, there was one person who said something to me, and that echoes in my head. And he said, "You're throwing your career away." And he was basing his comment on the data set that he had.
Mm-hmm.
But I just knew that wasn't true. My instinct told me that program in Arkansas that they didn't see in a similar light was the best move. And so we, my wife, my two kids, we left the ivory tower, as it's called, and went there. And to borrow from Robert Frost, that has made all the difference. It was absolutely the right move for me and my family. And it was so much based on that gut feeling, of knowing. And so anyway, that was one that came to mind that I thought I would share. But does that resonate with you and your experience?
Yes, absolutely. As a matter of fact, I had all my commanders read Malcolm Gladwell's book, Blink. Every one of them came back to me and told me, I see now why you made us read this after their experience in Iraq, because we were right in the mix over there, tough days in 2006. But yes, so what's important, it has allowed me to make decisions quicker.
Mm-hmm.
It's allowed me to use my experience. We're a product of our experiences, and you can't forget about lessons. A lot of people say, well, I really didn't learn anything. Yes, you learn something every day if you'll admit it. The other thing is confidence building. It builds confidence in you as a leader, and it builds confidence with your leadership below you, your subordinates, because they say, hey, he's paying attention and he's asking me to go back and take a second look at this, whatever it may be, and it builds confidence. And the other thing I would say that the ability to trust instincts helps is leaders to adapt to new and unforeseen circumstances. Because, like I say, what's the worst thing that's going to happen to me today? Be ready for the unexpected. It also helps with resilience as a leader. But there's got to be a balance again, Tom, between gut and what the data is telling you, and make sure you got the right balance. That's what it's taught me, and that's how I lived my life as I went on and commanded at the 4-star level.
Yeah, yeah. I think you're right. I mean, I think that we have a tendency, as I look at folks, you can group them into buckets, and there's the bucket that's all data all the time, only make decisions based on data. And then there are people that are all intuition all the time. And it's this middle ground where why can't you use both sort of pragmatically to help inform? And I'm reminded of this book called The Metaphoric Mind. It was written by Bob Samples back in the 70s. And he was writing about Albert Einstein. And he said that Albert Einstein called the intuitive, or for the sake of his book, the metaphoric mind, a sacred gift, and added that the rational mind was a faithful servant. And so in that book, Samples said, it is paradoxical that in the context of modern life, we have begun to worship the servant and defile the divine. And so if we're to believe what Samples wrote, it seems that Einstein believed intuition is really, really important. As much as Einstein is heralded as perhaps the greatest mind in modern history, he thought the intuitive was really, really important. You've shared some great reasons why instinct is important, as far as it helps your decision making. It increases the rapidity, how fast you can make these decisions. It increases people's recognition that you are paying attention, that you're engaged, and so forth. I think those are tremendous value adds with regard to instincts and intuition. Are there other sorts of things that you can think of that?
Yeah. Well,
come up?
The other thing is again, in an organization or company, you need to tell your people, your leaders, subordinate leaders, how you make decisions. Decision making, there's some science to it, but there's a heck of a lot of art. And into what we're talking about today factors right into that. Mm-hmm. I've been around folks that can't make a decision, and it frustrates leadership. So you got to know when to make a call. And I did that morning by notifying those families against what Army rules say. I mean, it's already on TV, for crying out loud. Right. And we got the aide's wife on the phone in the headquarters. But it's examples like that, a terrible tragedy that helps guide you in how you lead and how you are going to inform your subordinates about what information you need to make decisions. And I use that over in Korea. Let me tell you, I can't tell you how many times I said, trust your instincts here. This thing isn't right. And sure enough, it's not. But that's at the most senior level, because I had to prevent war over there, preserve the president's options, and maintain U.S. influence. That's what I did at the strategic level. You need to talk about that with your leaders, of how you lead. I helped down at how we shaped the new flag officers at Norfolk, Virginia, or Suffolk, Virginia. It's a capstone program. And I asked every flag officer, what makes you tick? What are the things? How are you going to lead? And do you inform your people? One, it cuts down anxiety and says, okay, this guy's going to ask a lot of questions. And, this guy's going to read things when I give it to him. So it guides you. Like I say, experience, practice helps build this type of trait that's often not found in people, because they're afraid to trust their instincts, and they take counsel of their fears. And you got to get that out, because, some things move at the speed of light, and you got to be on top of it, or the situation will get out of control on you.
There are a number of things that you said just then that really resonated. One was in sharing how you make decisions with those people that you're, leading, your subordinates, your immediate group that you're trying to help grow and develop. Reminded me of Admiral Snuffy Smith saying that he really made it a point to bring people in and to show them how he made decisions as he was leading, and the value that was, and people returning to him to say how valuable that was. And then the second thing was with regard to things move at the speed of light. You only have a certain amount of time to make a decision, and you have to act. And I'm trying to recall, I want to say that it was General Colin Powell, who said, when you've got 80% of the information, make the decision, because you'll never get to 100%, and it'll be too late by the time you do anyway. So that 80% is maybe informed by the data, but that other 20%, and maybe more depending on the situation, really is intuition, instinct, gut feeling.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I think General Powell is absolutely right with that, because you're never going to have perfect information. So you've got to make your own commander's assessment, if you will, CEO assessment of where do I think we really are with whatever the situation is or the decision I'm about to make. There's an art to this. And I come back to that because, we have a tendency to want to predict the future, and you'll get that wrong. Every time you try to make a prediction, it'll be wrong. I try not to do that anymore, and just look at what the situation is, facts versus what I think, and that's where my experience comes in, and how I've been trained as an Army officer for nearly 40 years, and it works. But it allows you to continue to improve. That's the other thing leaders have to do, is continue to improve. And that's what I've tried to do. Every job I had to prove myself. I had to show them that I was up to the task, and not being arrogant about things or stuff like that, but being genuine as a person. And everybody in that formation is important, from the lowest ranking guy all the way up, and everybody's got to be treated the same. That's the way I led. But it's trusting your instinct. You can walk in a unit, and you can assess that unit pretty quick by just listening to the commanders talk, the non-commissioned officers, and the soldiers, because the soldiers always tell you what's going on. And they'll tell you the bad news and what's really not going well.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Well, I suspect, for a lot of our listeners, especially those in data-heavy fields, they may bristle at this idea of trusting our instincts and so on, because we're supposed to be data-driven and scientifically grounded and all that. And gut feeling just seems really far from that. But my own experience, and yours certainly, as we've been talking, I've absolutely seen it cost me or others when we didn't trust our instincts. That isn't always the case, but certainly often enough that it made a difference. And for those who aren't in the military or medicine, the cost is rarely in lives. Rather, it's in personnel or financial expenses or market share and similar sort of metrics. But there can be real negatives to it if we don't trust our instinct, just like you shared with the story about Red River Depot. What are the other than catastrophic things, what are some of the other negatives that you've seen when folks aren't trusting their instincts?
Well, you'll find that communication in an organization isn't good. Up and down, lateral communications, vertical communications are not good. People have a tendency to use electronic means rather than talking to people. Now, the bigger the organization is, the harder it is to do that, but there's ways to do that where you can communicate to your people. You got to practice in the environment you're in. And like I say, do some exercises that allow you quick decision-making exercises. You got to be an expert in your field. I did a lot of reading and understanding my practice to make sure that I knew what was going on, and the Army runs off of doctrine. And so I always tried to make myself better every day and learn something. And the other thing that I learned to build and foster a good command climate, spend more time listening than transmitting. And I've watched a lot of senior officers that are on transmit all the time. And it shuts down anybody that's trying to tell the leader what's going on. I've seen that. I did 54 rotations at Fort Irwin, California, at the Combat Training Center. 54. And those are 1 month
That's
rotations
a lot.
out there. And let me tell you, what I got out of all that, it's the best leadership laboratory the Army has, because you see the good and bad of leaders. And you see leaders that their units hate them because one, they don't listen to them, and how they process information. They can't make a decision, and then things go awry within the first few minutes of being in the desert out there. I saw that on a constant basis. Utilize technology where it enables your decision making is the other thing I do, especially in today's world. There's a lot of great technology out here that you can use, digital technology. And I had a digital division, but I always wanted to hear that commander's voice because I could feel if he was in trouble or was worried or not worried about something. So you got to know your people. That's the other thing that's in leading and trusting your instincts, and that helps make you a better leader when you're doing those sorts of things.
Yes, sir. Lots of great tips there about how we can improve our instinct. As I was listening and just sort of synthesizing all those great tips, it kind of in my mind comes to get as much information as you can from different sources, trusted sources, your personnel, those who are immediately around you, but the people lower in the organization, the frontline folks who have the data real time in hand, get those things. Always growing, always improving our expertise and developing our experience, because that allows us to hardwire the information so that it becomes a reflex, it becomes a gut instinct. So those are really good. Maybe perhaps now would be a good time to touch on the scientific backing of intuition or gut instinct. It turns out it isn't as off the wall as some of our listeners may think. The reality is we can develop a non-objectifiable sense regarding various circumstances, and that can be called intuition or gut instinct or a hunch. And on previous podcasts, we've talked about various cognitive biases and how they can have negative impacts on decision making, recognizing that many studies that have been out there and have found that decision making can be negatively impacted, can be negatively affected by over-reliance on intuitive responses and heuristics. As with so many things, there's more to that story. So if we look at studies by Dr. Laura Huang at Harvard, in the Harvard Business School, she found that not only is intuition valuable for decision making, its value actually increases in the setting of risk and uncertainty. So that's absolutely the case in the military. When risk is very high and uncertainty is often just as high, if not higher. But in a number of domains, that's true. And she found that our gut feeling is not a quick, impulsive, or emotional response, which probably is what people tend to think about, but rather it is based on, as you've said, it's based on our experience. And in her studies, those who had expertise and experience in a given area and who were faced with problems with a high level of unknowable information made better decisions when they relied on their gut instinct. And the key there is the high levels of experience and expertise. They get, as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, they get hardwired to a point where we don't have to think about them, and we kind of just know what the answer is. And that gets translated into the sense of gut instinct that may be part of the reason that Gary Kasparov, the great chess grandmaster, said that intuition is the defining quality of a great chess player. But beyond the work of Dr. Huang, other studies have shown that decisions made on the basis of intuition carry a greater sense of authenticity and commitment, which you kind of hit on, this idea that people, when you're using your gut instinct, people know that you're paying attention, that you're actually thinking about things, that you're actually involved in this and really committed to them. So that resonates perfectly well with the literature. That's been proposed to be the result of intuition being what's called a cognitive enabler of trust and collaboration at the group level. And that's been illustrated in several studies of this classic idea in psychology and other research called the prisoner's dilemma, where cooperation was reached through intuition, whereas decisions that were made purely based on weighing the options and deliberation were viewed as selfish. So ultimately, the science really indicates the best approach to decision making is one that balances that deliberation, as we said, with intuition. And the riskier and less certain the situation, intuition seems to have a greater and more valuable role. So that's the science brief on why intuition is really important and to some degree how it works and why we should take it into account when we're making decisions. General Thurman, you have shared a host of great ways as we've gone through our discussion about how, folks can build their muscle, can grow their ability to develop their instincts. Can you kind of run through just the high level points again, just here at the end?
Yeah, I can. First off, you got to have good self-awareness of yourself, and then your experience and reflection. And let me just kind of go through that. Self-awareness is mindfulness to practice your inner thoughts and feelings. Just kind of, hey, am I thinking about this right? What's the nature of the problem we're trying to solve here? Are we on the right problem, or are we just talking about something? And then learn from past decisions, write it down. What are you learning? If I could go start my life over again in the military, I would write down what I'm learning every day in a legible fashion, one or two things, and I would have a heck of a lot of knowledge that was documented, because you tend to forget things. And that gets back to reflection, journaling. Keep a journal of your thoughts and feelings, and go back and review it and practice. I said practice decision making. You can have little exercises that paint a scenario. You got X amount of time, and it doesn't have to be a military scenario. It can be something that you're having in a major corporation. Practice, and then have positive reinforcement. What that means is you tell people, this is, again, how I make decisions, and this is the information I'm looking for. I'm going to always examine second and third order effects, and you can practice that and solicit feedback.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of leaders won't do that. How am I doing for you guys and gals? And then Tom, you said it. It's balance. It's balancing the scientific data with what your gut instincts are, the feel of the situation, and you factor all that in, and I think that'll make you a better leader. And then be consistent. And last thing I'd tell you is have the courage to act on your instincts. Have that courage, and it may be an unpopular thing. Have the courage to do that. The last thing I'd tell you with subordinates out there is to make sure you have trust in that organization. Trust is one of the things that you have to build, and it can easily be broken.
Yes, sir.
When you say you're going to do one thing, yet your actions don't match what you say and how you want to lead. And that's trust is fundamental to any organization. The last thing I'll tell you, I help organizations in my second life out here, rather than being a retired general officer. I help CEOs.
Yes, sir.
And I got one CEO. I said, look, write down your priorities. What's the most important thing in this company right now? Mm-hmm. And you don't have to have a laundry list. What's the top 3 priorities? So I got her to do that. And I said, and then start sending out a sends message that said, just want to remind everybody's doing a great job out here. Here are my priorities. Because I said, what's happening down below in the organization? People are doing their own thing.
Yes, sir.
And it's costing us money.
Yes, sir. That's great. I mean, I always learn so much when I have the opportunity to talk to you. And I, having interviewed 51 4-stars for my book and stuff, people always ask me, "Oh, who was your favorite? Who'd you learn the most from?" and so forth and so on. Right? That's an impossible question to answer. But one thing that I can name off certain people. It's like, here's the person that I want to be when I grow up. And this is the person who treated me most like I was a friend. And General J.D. Thurman is the guy that I would just love to spend a day hanging out on his ranch. Like, I have this vision of you having like land or whatever, and just like, let's go chop down some bushes. Or, like that's like you were, when I got to talk to you before, and same now, you're such a real person, and you're infinitely approachable and down to earth. So it's always a real pleasure to get to talk to you. I was, as you were listening to those things there at the end, I was wondering, you may know about this, but the Navy, the U.S. Navy actually has become so convinced that intuition is actually very important that they've started to study how to improve intuition in decision making and how they work together. And they identified that acquiring, just as we've touched on, acquiring a domain of knowledge through implicit learning. You said, write down the things that you learn and go over those in the situations and know those inside and out. Really developing that through implicit learning can help us automatically strengthen our ability to make decisions at a neural, cognitive, and behavioral level. And as a result of that, we have better intuitive decision making. And so at the end of the day, we can actually train ourselves to make better decisions on what we perceive to be our instincts. And we can really kind of develop our gut instinct if we focus on actually learning and training and so forth. So that, I was just thinking about that. But yeah, I want to make sure that I let you know that your name comes up not infrequently when people ask me about who is the best or whatever. I always say the guy I'd like to spend the day with just working around the ranch, General Thurman. So
I was out yesterday trying to get a tractor run.
Yeah,
I'm my own maintenance guy.
That's good. I think, we have some land here, and it's been great for my son to know what it means to get out on a tractor and have to do some manual labor and things. So I think it's good for the soul.
Yeah.
Well, General Thurman, I'll tell you, it has been, as always, an honor. It's a privilege to have you on the Science of Leadership today. Thank you, sir, for joining me.
Thank you, Tom. I've enjoyed it, and it's helped me be a better leader.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Science of Leadership. We hope today's discussion has inspired you and given you valuable insights to help you become a better leader. Remember, leadership is about helping those we lead do great things. It's a journey of continual growth and learning. When we embrace that journey with curiosity, courage, and humility, we can confront challenges, overcome barriers, and foster environments where everyone can succeed. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow or subscribe, leave a comment, and share it with others who are passionate about leadership. Until next week, keep leading with character, competence, caring, and communication. This is Tom Collins. Let's keep growing.